Like and welcome each one of you to our devotional study today. We're in Joshua chapter 8, where Joshua and the people of Israel defeat Ai. Keep in mind that Ai is a picture of the flesh. And we saw that not only did they have God's promise to defeat, but then they went about to follow the plan that God had given to them. And as we look at these verses we're looking at today, we find out also that they had God's power, and it's important for us to realize and understand that they went to battle against Ai, not in their own power. In Joshua chapter 7, they went in their own power, and they saw a terrible defeat. But in Joshua chapter 8, they go in God's power, and they experience victory. Keep in mind, as we look at the defeat of Ai here, that Ai is a picture of the flesh in our lives as believers, and how much we need that flesh defeated in our lives. In Joshua chapter 8, verses 18 through 23, we read about God's power here. It says, "And the Lord said unto Joshua, Stretch out the spear that is in thy hand toward Ai, for I will give it into thine hand. And Joshua stretched out the spear that he had in his hand toward the city. And the ambush arose quickly out of their place, and they ran as soon as he had stretched out his hand, and they entered into the city and took it, and hasted, and set the city on fire. And when the men of Ai looked behind them, they saw, and behold, the smoke of the city ascending up to heaven, and they had no power to flee this way or that way, and the people that fled to the wilderness turned back upon the pursuers. And when Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city, and that the smoke of the city ascended, then they turned again and slew the men of Ai. And the other issued out of the city against them, so they were in the midst of Israel, some on this side and some on that side, and they smote them, so that they let none of them remain or escape. And the king of Ai they took alive, and brought him to Joshua." So here, as we come into these verses, it becomes very clear to us that Israel fought the battle, but God gave the victory. It's important for us to understand that, not only in this chapter, but also in our lives as believers. Israel fought the battle, but God gave the victory. You see, the first time that Israel went to Ai, they went in their own power, and they suffered a terrible, humiliating defeat. This time, they went to battle walking in the power of God, and they were victorious. Again, there's a lesson here for those of us who struggle with the flesh. Keep in mind, Ai here is a picture of the flesh in the Word of God. And the battle against our flesh will not be won by our ability to say no. The battle will not be won because we are more powerful than the temptations we face. The fact is, friends, if you try to fight the spiritual battles of life in your own power, you are headed for a terrible defeat in your life. You might as well plan now for a string of sins and defeats if you're going to try to defeat the flesh in your own power. As we've said before, and I'm going to say again as we move through this, because it's an important concept for us to remember and understand, you cannot fight spiritual battles in the power and the energy of the flesh. You fight spiritual battles with spiritual strength, and that is a strength that comes to you from God. There is only one way, and one way only, for us to prevail in this battle against the flesh, and that is for us to learn to appropriate the power of God in our lives. We need to realize that we cannot win the battle ourselves. Now you say, well, that sounds kind of discouraging. Why would you come on here today to tell me that we can't win the battle, that there's no way that we can be victorious? Because it's the truth, friends. And the sooner we realize that, the better off we are. We cannot win the battle, but He can. Friends, greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world. When we are unable to fight the flesh and sin and the world, God will fight it for us. And let me tell you how to fight the flesh. We fight it in God's power. Come to Ephesians chapter 6. These are all familiar verses, but I want you to see them today, and I want you to be reminded of the importance of these verses, because sometimes the message of these verses is so simple that we forget the profound truth of it, and as a result of that, we do not see victory, but rather we see defeat in our lives as believers. Ephesians chapter 6, We are giving the armor of God. Notice it's not our armor. It is the armor of God, the armor that God gives to us. And as we come into this armory, we see in Ephesians chapter 6 and in verse 10 that Paul says to the believers of Ephesus, finally, my brethren, notice this, be strong. But he just doesn't tell them be strong. He says be strong in the Lord. Not be strong in yourself, not be strong in the flesh. Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. He's reminding them there of this simple truth that victory, friends, does not come from us. It comes from the Lord. Our strength spiritually does not come from us. It comes from the Lord. And he reminds us very clearly here that we must be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. It is his strength. It is his ability that enables us to be victorious in our lives. And come with me, if you would, to Philippians chapter 4 and in verse 13. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 13. Paul says to the church of Philippi, I can do all things. You know, sometimes people just stop the verse there. But that's not where the verse ends. It says, I can do all things, notice, through Christ, which strengtheneth me. He reminds us here that Christ is the one who gives us strength. And if I can put it this way, that when we surrender to him and acknowledge our weakness and the need that we have for him in our lives, that he infuses his strength into us so that we can be victorious over the world, the flesh, and the devil, not because of ourselves, but because of the strength that God gives to us. Come with me back to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and in verse 13. It says there in 1 Corinthians 10 and in verse 13, it says, there hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. Let me just point out and highlight a few things from this verse in the time that we have left today as we think about the fact that if we're going to have the victory over the flesh, that it needs to be the strength of God that we fight the flesh in, that we do not fight the flesh in our own strength. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but spiritual through God to the pulling down of strongholds. First of all, he says, there are no temptation taking you, but such as is common to man. How many times when we face things, does Satan try to put it in our minds that nobody has ever had to face what we're facing? That nobody's ever gone through what we're going through? Friends, the Bible makes it very clear here that what we face is common to man. There are others who have faced the exact same challenges that we face. But then it says this. It says, but God is faithful. Oh, friends, how we need to remember that. Satan will try to get you to doubt the faithfulness of God. He'll try to get you to doubt the love of God. He will try to get you to doubt whether or not God really cares about you. But friends, we're reminded here of the simple truth that God is faithful. We can rejoice in that great truth today. And then it goes on to say that he will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able. Friends, the verse does not say God won't give you more than you can handle. That's not what it's saying. And that's not what is true. Many times God does give us more than we can handle, because it's in those moments that we acknowledge that we need him, that we cast ourselves completely upon him and the strength that we have. And we say, Lord, I'm trusting you because there's nothing that I can do for myself. So he does give us more than we can handle. But then he says this, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape. Don't look so long at the temptation. Don't look so long at the circumstances that you miss the way out that God has for you. And then it says that you may be able to bear it. Friends, the only way any of us will ever see victory over this flesh is through the power of God. Let me encourage you, friend, today, be quick to acknowledge, Lord, I can't stand in my own power. I can't stand in my own ability. Lord, I need you. I need the help that you can bring, and I'm asking you to help me. I'm asking you to be with me, to encourage me, and to strengthen me every step of the way, because in you we can have the victory. Oh, friends, lean on his everlasting arms today and allow him to be all that you need. Have a great day.